Hey, remember these? They're back, and we've got them on Gearz.
Now, you're watching Gearz.
You know, one of the most popular modifications that you can do to a car or truck these days is in the exhaust system, because it gives you 3 areas of performance. It looks good sticking out the back, sounds better, and it gives you better performance. I mean, very few modifications give you that much bang for the buck. But where did all this start? I mean, where'd it come from? Well, to find that out, we have to go back a little bit. Way back. Back to there. Now, back in the 40s and 50s, hot rodders were known to cut off their mufflers because they wanted their rods to sound and perform like the race cars their heroes drove on the tracks. Unfortunately, the law frowned on this practice, and tickets piled up on any kid running straight pipes on the street. Then, in 1968, right in the middle of the muscle car wars, a product came out that changed everything. Now, it was about 2 feet long, it was painted red, and you either had them or you wanted them. Now, they were technically called a glass pack muffler, but nobody called them that. No, they were known by the name of the company that made them, the Cherry Bomb. Now, the Cherry Bomb was basically a straight pipe, so it flowed like crazy. And it had baffles inside and a layer of fiberglass to muffle it down and give the engine a throaty roar. Yeah, they were cool. So cool, in fact, that if you had them, you were cool. Even if you wore pants like these. Unfortunately, after a decade or so of complete dominance, well, things changed. People started building street rods instead of hot rods, and muscle cars died, and the Cherry Bomb pretty much went the way of the Pet Rock and the Rubik's Cube. Fortunately, the story doesn't end there, because a few years ago, a dedicated group of guys decided they were going to bring Cherry Bomb back better than ever.
We purchased Cherry Bomb March 2006 and thought, wow, what a name. I mean, it's just an icon in the automotive industry that's just been laying dormant.
Every one of them has a story about their first, it's always their first muffler. What, they got a ticket, or they did something and made people mad, or it was just that whole image.
The mufflers are built in the same massive facility in Loudon, Tennessee that they were 40 years ago, with a small dedicated staff putting them together. However, the idea here is not just to make them like they did before. No, they want to make them better.
We've moved back in the 60s, 70s. Those were made out of cold-rolled tubing, which cold-rolled rust. As everybody remembers, you know, mufflers used to fall out pretty quick. Now they last. Now it's aluminized, and we use a powder coating on them instead of just a traditional red paint.
Now that's all great, but Cherry Bomb's not just about glass pack mufflers, because the exhaust world is much bigger and more diverse than that. Now, if you're going to compete, you got to keep up with current technology. Now, you've probably always wondered where exhaust tubing comes from. Well, believe it or not, it starts out as a big roll of flat steel like this. And then you're not going to believe the process it goes through. Come on. The flat steel is fed into a massive machine that looks like an oversized erector set. There, a series of rollers and dies slowly bend and curve the metal until it's a perfect tube. The tube is then welded together, the weld seam sheared off, and after the smoke clears, out rolls a piece of exhaust tubing ready to go on your project. Wow. From there, the tubing is either shipped out or it goes to benders and assemblers so it can be built into a factory replacement system for your vehicle. And new systems are being designed and tested all the time. Now that's cool, but what about those two biggies? Sound and performance. I mean, an exhaust system isn't worth squat without those, right? Right. Now, what we've got here is Cherry Bomb's dyno room. You may notice this looks a little different than your typical dyno room because they've got all kinds of foam sound deflection all over here. It looks like a sound stage, which it kind of is, because any good performance muffler gives you performance and sound. So that's what they tune for in here. So what are these little... The dyno was actually used to ring the mufflers out and see what they have to offer.
That's what you call a classic sound.
That's a classic sound. Flow benches are also used to not only develop lines of performance mufflers, but also to test high-flow catalytic converters that bear the Cherry Bomb name.
No way.
Now that's great, but with the development of the chambered-style Vortex muffler, Cherry Bomb has once again set the performance world on its ear, just like it did in '68. Grab one of your competitors. Let's see what we got.
All right.
Okay.
Hold up.
That was 70%, right?
Yes.
You gotta be kidding, is that it?
It flowed about like that original replacement converter, right?
Whose is this?
It's not.
Oh, no, you can't show that.
No, we won't say anything.
That was
We won't say
awesome,
anything.
You know, there's an old saying out there, the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I guess that's true here, because there's been a lot of changes in the exhaust world over the last few years. The one thing that hasn't changed, you either have Cherry Bombs or you wish you did. You know, one of the most time-consuming and expensive parts to any project is the paint work. And it's the one area that most gearheads are just scared to death to get into, because you've got primers and base coats and clear coats and sealers and hardeners and candies and pearls and metallics and all kinds of stuff that absolutely boggle the mind of somebody that's never painted before. The problem is, where do you learn? I mean, some of this really nice PPG stuff that I use here, I can run up to $250 a gallon or more, and that's just for the color. Then you have to add the clears and the primers and the hardeners and all that other stuff. So you can easily get up to $1,000 just in materials. And at those kind of numbers, man, you better know what you're doing, because that can turn into an expensive mistake if you gotta sand it all off and do it again. Now, back in the day, they shot lacquer. It may not have been as tough and as durable as today's catalyzed urethanes, but it was cheap, it was easy, it looked fantastic, and it was something you could literally do in your driveway. It was the perfect training ground for the beginning painter. It's just too bad that lacquer's not still around. Or is it? Come on, I got something to show you. This is something brand new from Duplicolor, and it's called the Paint Shop Finish System. Now what this is a high-quality lacquer system that is completely VOC compliant, which means it's legal to use. Now it includes everything you're going to need to paint your vehicle. Check this out. Primer, color, and clear. And the best part about this is it's all pre-mixed. There's no mixing here, there's no reducer needed. You basically stir it up, pour it in the gun, and shoot it on. And that is what Duplicolor was after, to give you a complete system that's affordable and still gives you the look you're after. Now, how hard is this to really put on? Well, that's what we're about to show you. First, as with any paint job, you have got to prep the surface. And this goes way beyond just cleaning it up. Now, if you've got body work to do, you've got to do that first. We're gonna deal with that on a whole nother show. That's a completely different subject. Now, if your panel is straight and smooth and is wearing the original paint, it's only got one coat of paint on it, you're usually safe to go right over the top of that with a new color and not have to worry about making the paint too thick to where it'll chip and crack on you. However, if the panel has been repainted, it's got multiple paint jobs on it, you're gonna have to strip it down, take it to bare metal, and start over. If you don't, you're gonna have a big mess down the road. Once we have the surface clean, we'll need to wet sand it with 1000 grit sandpaper to give the surface some tooth so it gets a good bond with the new paint. Next, we'll load the gun with primer and lay it on the fender, starting with a light guide coat, followed by a couple of heavier medium coats. The next step is the color. And you've probably realized that lacquer goes on really easily and it dries very quickly. So you can keep moving and putting on additional coats at any time. 3 coats should give us proper coverage here. The last step, of course, is the clear. And it lays on as smooth and easy as the rest of the system. Now, once again, you can put on as many coats as you want and then come back 3 weeks later and add more coats because there is no recoat window. And after some drying time, that's what you've got, a genuine lacquer paint job. Man, this looks good right out of the gun. You wet sand this and buff it, it will blow your mind. Yeah, it's that hand-rubbed lacquer thing you've always heard about. Now, it looks good, it's affordable, but the best part is it's a great way for a beginning painter to learn how to shoot paint. So now you have no excuse not to go out there and paint your own car. Yeah. Hey, welcome back. You know, one thing that gearheads are always trying to do is something unique. You know, something that separates their vehicle from everything else out there. Now, obviously, the big stuff like the motor and the drivetrain and the suspension and the wheels and tires, obviously, these are extremely important. But usually the thing that separates the show winners and the cover cars from everything else out there are the little things, you know, the details, the fit and the finish, the proper use of parts that make sense, and those little customizing tricks that make people step back and go, oh man, that's cool, what'd you do? And that is the response that you want. Now, one of those little customizing tricks that almost any car or truck can benefit from, and is almost always overlooked, is the fitting and tucking of bumpers. Now, the first question is, why? Why would you do that? Well, let me show you here on this old Nomad. Now notice, as you come down the fender, there's actually a body line here to tuck that bumper up in there. And also notice that this gap is big here, it gets really tight here in the corner, and then gets really big again here on the end. Now, that's stock. That's how this thing came from the factory. Most people wouldn't think a thing about it. But you've got to admit, it would look a lot better if that gap was the same all the way around there. Now, you might be able to make it a little better by adjusting the bumper, but it's still not going to be perfect. These things were built on an assembly line. This is how they came. So what you're going to have to do is cut the bumper apart and basically reconstruct the bumper so it fits the contour of the body better. And that is what we're going to show you how to do. All right, the subject slated for surgery today is Copperhead. Now, you may notice that I've got brand new chrome-plated bumpers from LMC Truck on this thing. And they're great. You take them out of the box, you bolt them on, they look fine, if you want a stock look. But the problem with these old trucks is they're even worse than the cars. Man, the bumpers just ended. And then, of course, you have this huge gap over here because these things were made to hit fences and stuff. Having a tight-fitting bumper on a truck back in the 60s was not important, but it is now. So this can definitely use some help. Now, the first thing that you're gonna need is a bumper. And since LMC Truck makes bumpers for just about everything out there, we went back to them and got 2 replacement bumpers for the front of the 67 Chevy pickup. Now, the reason I got 2 of them is the first one I'm gonna modify. The other one, I'm gonna cut it all to pieces and use the metal to donate to this project. Now, don't make the mistake of getting the more expensive chrome ones here because obviously you're gonna cut everything apart and have to have it chromed at the end anyway. No, getting a couple raw ones is the way to go because they're perfect for this kind of project. The first step is to get the bumper fitting as good as possible. And make sure that it's centered side to side, and then it's also square and level. Now, you may have to massage your mounting brackets to get everything right. You can't mess with that, that's right on. Okay, now comes the design part. This is where you decide how you're going to change your bumper. Now, no two bumper projects are alike, so there's really no rules here, but I do have a suggestion. You generally want to stick with the style of what's going on. So, for this bumper, I'm going to extend this top part back about this far to kind of fill up this dead area, and then this bottom part, I'm going to bring back and angle up in to meet the top, and that angle is going to match the wheel well, so everything is symmetrical. Then, of course, everything will be shoved right up against the body. Now, don't hesitate to use a cardboard template here, because that'll give you a really good idea of what you're doing. And that is going to look cool. Hey, we're back and deep in the process of showing you what's involved in the subtle art of tucking and forming bumpers. Now, we've already taken you through the pre-planning and the prep stage of a project like this, and we have a new bumper bolted up. It's centered, it's square, it's level, and all the primer is stripped off of one side. So this thing is ready for surgery. Now, with all that done, it's time to start cutting metal. Now begins the process of trial fitting and shaping. Now remember, this is a creative process, so be prepared to spend some time here. It's gonna look good. The piece, the piece. There's not anything in any book or any manual that's going to help you figure out what is right for your vehicle. It's just you and the metal. And that's actually going to lay in there real nice. Really nice. Whoa. All right, hopefully this gives you an idea kind of where I'm going here. Now notice it already looks a lot better, but this curve, now the bumper would go all the way into the body and would give it kind of a rounded bumper car looking thing, which we don't want. So now that I've got the preliminary fit, I'm going to come in here and cut this straight so our gap will be the same all the way here, and then I'll go in and section the bumper and move everything up against the body. That way it'll tuck nice and tight and there won't be any big bubbles. We don't want any big bubbles. You don't use little body hammers on this stuff. You gotta use a big hammer. Not the BFH, the little FH. Yeah, much better. Okay, now that I've got the top fitting here pretty much how I want it, I'm gonna come in and do a little bit of contouring down here in the bottom, kind of roll that in. All right, let's take a look at this. Oh yeah, now that is how this thing should have come from the factory. I mean, it's very subtle, but it makes a world of difference. Also, I was able to tuck this in enough here that I'm not gonna have to section the bumper. It already tucks in. All right, now that I've got it placed, all I gotta do is weld it in. Okay, was all that work worth it? Well, come on in here, take a look at this. Yeah, there you go. Now, obviously, I still need to take the bumper off and do some grinding around the edges to true them up, but you can see how tight this thing now fits around the body. If you come around the back, you can see no big gap anymore. It's nice and tight, fits the wheel well perfectly, nice and subtle. This is how the truck should have come from the factory. Now, just in case you've forgotten what we started with, take a look. Big, wide gaps and a bumper that looks like everybody else's. Now look at what we've got. A tight gap, can't even get my fingers in on the top, and can't even get my fingers in the back. This is perfect. It fits the contour of the truck. Now all you've got to do is finish the other side, take it down to advanced plating, have it chromed, and you're gonna end up with a bumper that nobody else has got. And people are gonna come up to you and go, man, where did you get that? And that's where you get to say, I made it myself, and you can't have it.
And now, what are you working on?
Hey, today's gearhead is from Camas, Washington. His name is Jamie Gongaware, and here he is by his project, a 59 Jeep FC150. Man, those things are cool. Now, he knew the frames were bad, so he just junked that, put it down on a CJ5 frame with a small block Chevy and Vegas steering, seats out of a Fiero. Check it out, here's what he's got now. Man, that thing is sweet. Now, if you have a project that you'd like to have featured here on the show, man, send some pictures in to the Gearz TV website. We'll see if we can get it on the air. Now, you've seen what Jamie's working on. You know what I'm gonna be working on in a couple weeks. Now it's your turn. Get out there, work on something.